Okay, so welcome to the last part of our tutorial. Let's see now connecting this conceptual modeling part with requirements engineering. And this is a recent work that we are doing on a methodology that we call OBRE, O-B-R-E, standing for Ontology-Based Requirements Engineering. And this work is a collaboration with Glenda Amaral, Giancarlo Guizzardi, and John Mylopoulos. Glenda is actually here now. I'm very happy about that. And yeah, and unfortunately, John couldn't join. Hopefully he will get better soon. So today we face, with the complexity of the systems that are, especially AI systems and social technical systems, we become more concerned with issues such as ethics, privacy, trust, security, and all these, non-functional requirements that are kind of fancy. They are not, they're vague, as Giancarlo mentioned before our presentation. And this complexity makes it necessary for us to provide some methodological support for requirements engineers to capture this kind of non-functional requirements. We see many issues, for instance, regarding artificial intelligence systems, such as, will these systems actually work in our favor? Are we going to lose jobs? Are people from different social backgrounds going to have access to these systems? Will the systems go rogue? Should we allow systems like this to kill? And very difficult questions that we must answer in order to implement, to develop such systems, right? And then we start wondering, so what are things such as ethics? This is one point, but also like regarding the part that AI may represent a threat or not, or may decide to work on its own or not. These things have to do with trustworthiness. And for this kind of non-functional requirements, not only we need to have some methodological support, but we need to realize more than anything that these are problems of requirements engineering. So we hear a lot about, AI systems, are they going to serve their purpose or not? So requirements engineering has this fundamental role in guaranteeing an ethical and trustworthy information systems. It's funny that people talk about these issues without realizing that this is a requirements engineering problem, right? So the idea of ontology-based requirements engineering, this methodology that we are creating, is to serve as this guidance to help requirements engineers, requirements analysts to go from this kind of non-functional requirements that are vague to more specific and things that are analyzable requirements, and guiding them in the process of eliciting and analyzing such requirements. So this phase is, this methodology is composed of these three phases, right? So the first phase is the semantic understanding of a given non-functional requirements via ontology, and the kinds of ontology that we were just talking about in the previous part of this tutorial. Then in the second phase, we have ontology instantiation, and in the third phase, the requirements analysis. And of course, we can iterate these two last activities, these two last phases can be iterated. for that, we envision two main roles. So for the first activity, it is important that we rely on an ontology engineer. That is someone that is capable of building such kind of good, high quality ontologies, let's say. And for the phases 2 and 3, the requirements engineer plays a more important role. Of course, in the phase 1, there may be needed some interaction between the ontology engineer and the requirements engineer in order to find out what kind of ontology should be developed and or used. Because the good news is that many of these ontologies are now existing, right? They can simply be reused. So a pre-existing ontology may be adopted for step 1, and then you don't need to develop it from scratch. It may be adapted also with the help of the ontology engineer, and then the next phases will happen. And we'll, in this presentation, go through all these phases, also illustrating them with a case study that we conducted recently. Okay. Okay. So, in the case of trustworthy systems, this is let's say the kind of the type of requirement that we are going to talk about today, right? So we were focusing on trustworthiness, and most of what we're going to talk today are in these two papers that I already put here in the presentation. And if you are interested, we can, as Giancarlo said, send you the presentations all together, and you will see the papers there, the links there. So how can we obtain trustworthiness by design? This is the fact. This is what we aim with the OBRE methodology, because since we start from the beginning focusing on what trustworthiness is and what are the related concepts to this notion, we would like to design the system by taking this into account. So first of all, it's promoting the semantic understanding of what trustworthiness means and how it relates to other important concepts, and take these concepts into account when eliciting and analyzing requirements. So the main idea is guiding the requirements analyst in capturing trustworthiness requirements, right? Just to let you know what are the main concepts and the main ideas behind the ontology that we built for trustworthiness, we have some elements here. So the first thing that we should take into account is that trustworthiness is a relational concept. Someone trusts in someone else or in something to accomplish a goal. Right, so we don't trust, for instance, a very simple example. There are some friends that we trust with some information, but not with very confidential ones, because we know that that person can talk to other people about them, right? So we trust to accomplish something. Or maybe, like here, these examples, John trusts Paul to accomplish, for instance, if we are talking about a company that provides financial support to people, right? So suppose John is the manager, and Paul is actually the guy that decides on the loan, if the loan is going to be granted. So John trusts Paul to deciding if the client is eligible or not for a loan. And it can also be a system. So John can trust a particular system in the company to perform some calculations, right? He is not going to rely on Paul for the calculations, but to a particular system. So this is the first important thing about trustworthiness. It's a relational concept. It's not universal, right? So a system is not trustworthy for everything. A system is maybe trustworthy for particular functions and particular intentions of the user. Then the second part is understanding how these concepts relate. So first of all, an agent has an intention to accomplish a specific goal. And for that, it relies on a trusted entity. This means that the trusted entity has some capability, and the agent believes that the entity has the capability of accomplishing the goal. That's why for this person, for this agent, this entity is trustworthy, right? And besides this belief that the system can do something that he wants, the agent also has a belief that possible vulnerabilities that are pertinent to the context of such system will not prevent the entity to accomplish goals. So any system can be surrounded by particular vulnerabilities, right? So saying that a system is trustworthy means that it can accomplish the goal, but also that the existing vulnerabilities will not prevent that goal to be obtained. And finally, the other concept which is very important for us is that the system, that there needs to be evidence of trustworthy behavior of this system. So it can be things that are emitted by the system itself, for instance, explanations, the presence of some risk mitigation measure that the system does. But it may also be in form of certificate or credentials about such system. Now we are going to see how to apply OBRE to analyze trustworthiness requirements. It's important to understand that when we build such ontology of trustworthiness, we rely on pre-existing ontologies. And we perform this kind of ontological analysis. What is an ontological analysis in this, in our sense? It's a way of creating ontologies in a consistent way by reusing pre-existing and more founded works. So we start from using foundational ontologies, like the ones that we saw in the previous part of this, this talk, right? So the notions of UFO and languages such as ONTO-UML, right? This will be the base of the whole analysis. So we start by looking at parts and wholes and rows and all these foundational concepts. But we can also reuse some other core ontologies that are here in the intermediate parts of our tree. Let's say I'm looking here, taking an analogy of a tree, in which the new concepts are the leaves, right? So we have from the trustworthiness related concepts, so trust, reliability, vulnerability, all these concepts will be founded on the concepts of the layers of the layers below. So either from pre-existing core ontologies or from foundational ontologies. And we do this by relating the new concepts with the existing concepts. I like to explain this because when we want to build an ontology, if we have to do it from scratch, it's a lot of work. But if we find some pre-existing works, we can actually reuse them in a way that we connect such concepts in a consistent way, and then it's much better because we can not only profit from the pre-established conceptualization, but from all this part that Giancarlo explained before. So the axiomatization, the validation of these models. So we can already, let's say, profit from the pre-existing and established works. In our case, we connected two existing ontologies. One is a trust ontology, and the other one is an ontology that we made in a previous work about NFRs, in which we characterize the NFRs. Just to review the trust ontology, the main idea of the trust ontology is that there are two entities, the truster and the trustee, and the truster trusts the trustee, okay? And so the trust is a mode, is a characteristic that inheres in the truster, but it's also existentially dependent on the trustee, okay? Because it's about the trustee, right? And it has a particular degree. You trust that trustee in a particular degree. And as we said, there is always a purpose. So the purpose of the trust is to accomplish some intention, which is also an intention of the agent playing the role of the truster, okay? And trust is actually composed of these beliefs, right? The beliefs, the capability belief, which I exemplified before. So the belief that the trustee can accomplish some goal, and the vulnerability belief, which is the belief that such vulnerability, the vulnerability involving that system, will not prevent the goal of being accomplished, right? And both capability and vulnerability are characteristics. Here we call it disposition, but these are characteristics that have an emergent behavior, that can emerge in particular situations, and they belong to the trustee. In our case, the stakeholder will be the truster and the system to be the trustee. Now, revising the ontology of non-functional requirement, the important thing here is to understand that we view requirement as a goal. So it's also connected to an intention of a stakeholder. So the stakeholder aims the system to accomplish a particular goal. And this requirement can be non-functional and functional. In case it's functional, it refers to a function, to something that the system does. And we also see a function as a kind of disposition. And if it's a non-functional requirement, which is the one that we focus here for understanding trustworthiness, then we say that we also call these quality goals, non-functional requirements, we call it quality requirement or quality goal. And it's important that each non-functional requirement refers to a quality universal, so a type of quality. In this case, if I talk about trustworthiness, the quality that it refers to is trustworthiness, right? And such quality can obtain a value in a particular quality region, right? So if we talk about quality region, just to give you an example so that you understand very, very easily, when we talk about color, right? There are different regions where you can see in different scales, RGB, for instance, or in some other color scale, and there is a region in a space in that region that is the red, belongs to red or belongs to blue, right? And in the same way, we can think of a region, a spatial region, which belongs trustworthiness and non-trustworthy, right? So it's a way to map the quality in particular values. But as we said in the beginning of when we think about trustworthiness, this is still very vague. So it's important for us to understand what connects to trustworthiness. So this is the reference ontology we built, trustworthiness requirement reference ontology. And basically we put together the NFR ontology and the trust ontology. So in this part, you see that a trustworthiness requirement is a kind of quality requirement, which also can be decomposed in sub-requirements. We can also see, okay, maybe I'll pass this, but then I'll come back. You can also see that the requirements, the system intends to satisfy a trustworthiness requirement, that the stakeholder trusts the system to a certain degree. This is this part of the ontology. I won't explain everything because I already explained the trust ontology. So here it's just like the truster and the trustee are here. That the stakeholder has a belief related to the capability of the system and a belief related to the vulnerabilities of that system, right? So the belief that the system has the capability to perform the desired action, capability belief, and the belief that the system's vulnerabilities will not prevent it from exhibiting the desired behavior. Finally, in this part of the ontology, we can map those concepts that we mentioned before about the trustworthiness evidence, right? Evidence of trustworthiness. So the system can emit trust warranting signals like explanation, risk mitigation mechanism, or dispositional evidence in the form of a certificate or as a past user history, etc. And these contribute to the trust that the user has in the system. Okay, so now let's come back to those slides that I skipped. The point is that since the trustworthiness is a non-functional requirement, in a previous paper, when we actually created such ontology of non-functional requirements, we proposed such ontology, we also proposed some operations that we could do based on this ontology. And some of these operations, and these operations are refinement of non-functional requirements, operationalization of crisp non-functional requirements. We call crisp non-functional requirements those that assume specific values in the region. So just to give you an example, if we say that a system needs to have a response time within 15 seconds, it means that there is a region there, which is from 0 to 15 seconds, a region in the time space, in which you can actually map such NFR. Then we call it crisp. And we also, in the same publication, we talk about gradable NFRs, which is a way of making this constraint fuzzy. So instead of saying, we want to have a system that has a response time of 0 to 15 seconds, we actually say, okay, 15, but 17 is not bad either, or 13. So you make a more fuzzy, let's say, interpretation of such requirement, right? And in this paper, we have a way of calculating if the degree of satisfaction of this kind of requirements, right? So these are interesting operations. I don't have time to talk about them in detail in this presentation, but I thought I would leave the reference to you guys. And the only one that I'm going to talk about is the refinement, because it's the one we used in the case of the trustworthiness requirement. So refining means conceptually deconstructing the NFR's referred qualities. So you actually will understand which sub-qualities that quality has. You can, in the case of trustworthiness, the first intuition we had is that trustworthiness is really related to reliability, transparency, and information truthfulness. So if we think about these three qualities, it's important that we also try to understand ontologically what they mean, because this will give us some idea of how to deal with such requirement and even validate it. For instance, to understand if a system is reliable, we must understand how much of the stakeholders' capability belief is actually met by the results of the system's operation. So in understanding what reliability means, we can actually guide the requirements engineer in understanding, okay, so now how can I understand if such system is reliable or not? By identifying the beliefs of the users regarding the capabilities of the system. This is just a simple example to illustrate the approach. Okay, so having made this part of, let's say, semantic clarification, right, which is the part of ontological analysis, we move to the second phase, which is the ontology instantiation. And in this part, we already ask for the participation of the requirements engineer, because this is where he's going to get the ontology and use it to guide the requirements analysis part of the, the requirements analysis of the system. So we can actually see this phase, we can decompose it in 4 activities. So the first thing is identify the key concepts in the ontology and to create questions that are based on these key concepts. Following, we can send the questions through questionnaire, or we can interview the stakeholders, and finally use the answers to populate the ontology. When we say populate the ontology, we mean giving instances to the ontology, because up to this point, we only talked about the classes and not the instances, right? We were discussing all the concepts in the level of classes. So to illustrate the elicitation with the trustworthiness case, here there is a table in which we took all these concepts from the trustworthiness requirements reference ontology, so intention, capability, belief, system capability, and so on. And we created questions based on such concepts. So the stakeholders trust the system to which intention, right? To do what? The stakeholders trust the system because they believe that it is capable of what? Which capability does the stakeholder believe the system have? The stakeholder trusts the system because they believe that it has mechanisms to prevent which kind of vulnerabilities. So by understanding the concepts, then we know which questions we should ask, okay? Now I present to you a case study that we conducted recently regarding an existing system called PIX. PIX is an instant payment ecosystem developed by the Central Bank of Brazil. And it's also managed by this institution, right? And it basically involves the banks and the credit card operation companies and so on and so forth. So institutions that will have process the transactions, the payment transactions, and it involves the end users that are, let's say, the payer and the money receiver. So something that you can use on the cell phone, and you can just send payment requests to other people, and the people can make a money transfer through such system, make payments and so on and so forth, using a unique interface, but actually as accessing the systems of different banks, different card holders. In the case of Pix, even small companies that lend money and have like provide financial support can participate in this platform. So in this case, it's very important that such system is trustworthy, right? So that's why we decided to use Pix as a case study to see the viability, the feasibility of the application of our methodology, OBRE methodology. In this case, if we instantiate the concepts in the ontology with the concepts of Pix, we have that the stakeholders are the banks, the end users, the trusted entities, the system itself is Pix. And there are several evidence of trustworthy behavior. For instance, the credentials of the Central Bank of Brazil, which is considered to be a trustworthy organization, right? The fact that the system is available 24/7, is always online, and the fact that it really implements some risk mitigation measures, for instance, preventing fraud, also taking care of the privacy of the users. And there are some success stories, performance history, and so on and so forth. So different evidence of trustworthy behavior. So this is a model of the instance of the ontology, right? Here we represent, this is not made in any specific language, it's a language that we created ourselves. It resembles UML, but it's not. So here we actually have the instance, for instance, end user, and the concept, right? So we can see, for instance, that we have the end users, the end user has some trust on Pix, but it's related to the intention of send or receive payment transfer safely, right? So the end user trusts the system to achieve such intention, to achieve the goal of sending and receive payment transfers. It intends to satisfy different trustworthiness requirements. Here are a few: security, confidentiality, integrity, authenticity, transparency, and emits several trustworthy signals, including the visual identity that we discovered that in the case of Pix makes a big difference for the trust. The fact that everyone is using the same visual identity, right? For it's a way of like making uniform the use of the system. The documentation, advertising, using everyday examples, so they make targeted advertising for the users, and also explanations. They post videos to explain the system and to make people, to reassure people in face of some concerns that people have on privacy and so on and so forth. And there are also some dispositional evidence. For instance, the fact that they are compliant with a cybersecurity policy, right? Particular one. And has some, the user has, for instance, a capability belief, which speaks is safe, right? And the system has the efficient security mechanism. So it's related, they are related, there is an extension dependence between these two instances. So this, let's say, a kind of diagram is able to show us some instances. Of course, there is a lot more. We just put some here just to illustrate, right? But for the PICS system, there is more than this. And then for the requirements analysis part, as I was mentioning before, talking to João, we can actually choose goal modeling. You can define a requirements table, or we can define user stories, all having the ontology and the instances as guidance. So for instance, here is a goal model of the PICS, focusing on security. And we actually published the other models in a particular link, because we weren't able to bring all of them to you, but they are published there in case you have the interest to see. And I won't go through all of them because I want to leave you time for questions. I won't go through the model, but I mean, it's talking about sending and receiving payments, and how how PICS accomplishes this by, you know, having this quality goals, and by refining this into a more specific goals, and finally having some functionality, some represented here by tasks, and some resources. So for those who know iStar, this is a pretty straightforward model. It's important to realize that all these classes, all these concepts, these entities that are marked with this blue star came from the ontology instances. So just to show you how the ontology and the ontology instance can guide the requirements engineering in elaborating such model, right? So there are the goals there that can be mapped to goals here, and the agents there that can be mapped to the actors here, and so on and so forth. Then you must refine them in the analysis.
Okay. Renata, if I may,
yes.
So we have the relationships between the ontology model and the requirements models, the goal models, for example. You do the mapping from the ontology to the requirements?
Exactly, okay. Exactly. So we can see, you can see in the ontology model here, like send or receive payment transfer safely. This is an intention here, right? And it connects to this goal here, send and receive payments transfer in few seconds on a 24/7 basis. Okay, so you can go from the instance of the ontology to the model that you have now for the goal model. In the same way, you can think of building user stories if you want to use user stories instead of goals. And then you have to map them a little bit differently, but you can use the ontology instances to guide in the creation of such models or such user stories. So the main benefits of this approach is the terminology clarification, clearly, right? So also it's a way to support mini negotiation in the case that different stakeholders may have different ideas of what trustworthiness mean. As we saw before, an ontology can actually make explicit what is the view that is going to be adopted for that system. So if the stakeholders have different ideas, they will have to come to a consensus, and then the consensus will be present in the ontology, right? Will be, let's say, will be used to conceive the ontology. And in this it's a way of looking at the requirements, the given requirements that we need for the system, in having a deep ontological semantics to them and to related concepts. Uncovering related NFRs, this was very apparent to us, because you can do that system by system, but you can also look at theoretical approaches, how they view the given non-functional requirements, and what aspects, what other requirements are related to them. Providing guidance during requirements elicitation and during the analysis. So since the elicitation with the questions and then in the elaboration of the models, we had guidance from the ontology. And this especially targets complex NFR. So this kind of non-functional requirements that are not very easy to understand, right? And it is important to note that such requirements, they need constantly monitoring, because they may change also in face of the use of the system. So I'll give you an example. In case of PICs, in Brazil, there is a lot of safety problems, right? We are a country that unfortunately, there are, for instance, kidnapping of people, and then they started like to kidnap people to use the PICs. So then people start giving that new, let's say, emergent behavior of the context surrounding the system. People started having trusting issues with PICs. And then the PICs team now is starting to restrict the use of the platform in determined times of day, things that they previously did not think of doing. They actually didn't really want to do it. They wanted the system to be able to do any kind of transaction at any time of the day. But now they're actually saying, okay, to make transfers after 10 o'clock, you can do it up to 1,000 reais, which is the Brazilian money. So they are changing the trustworthiness requirements according to changes in the environment. So such type of requirements need constant monitoring. It's not possible to just create them and implement them in the system and that's it, right? So you need to reuse the methodology in the requirement life cycle to understand if that requirement has changed or not, right? And some final remarks. This was very useful case study for us. I'm talking about the case study because it made us realize what would be related to trustworthiness, what other. Because as I said before, intuitively in the beginning, we said, okay, if we have reliability, transparency, and truthfulness in the information exchanged by the system, that should be enough. But then we saw that, okay, there's more to it. So for the PICs, for instance, included availability, instantaneity, usability, easiness. For instance, the users trust the system because it's easy to use. And this is a rich, let's say, information for us. And we are not sure if we can have like established idea of what trustworthiness involves, or if this changes depending on the system and depending on the context. All right. So this is to be seen with new case studies, new cases that we're going to use. And to acknowledge that this is a work in progress and it's only preliminarily evaluated because the case study in this case was conducted by the developers of the methodology. So we still need to do to conduct more case studies, maybe some experiment with requirements analysts to validate the ontology. And this is work, future work, right? Finally, I like to thank to acknowledge, to provide this acknowledgement to the PICS team. We really couldn't have done it without them. They have been really supportive to this case study and assisted us in all the information that we needed. And to make a commercial, so this is a workshop that we organized, me together with Jennifer Horkoff, Anna Perini, and Angelo Susi. We've been organizing this for 2 years in the context of the REFSQ conference, and it's called RE for AI. And yeah, as the name says, we in this forum, we talk about requirements engineering for artificial intelligence systems, and much of the discussion that we are having about trustworthiness, ethics, and so on happens in this forum. So I wanted to take this opportunity to invite you to submit, because next year we are planning a 3rd edition, of course. Okay. And this is my contact information in case you'd like to send me an email. I would be glad to collaborate. Now we're open to questions.